Hello, I'm Nan Simonson. I have never done a Facebook Live in the evening, but I did a 50-minute one today that, when I tested it afterwards, had only recorded for a 19-minute period and cut off everything else. So I deleted that and I'm re-recording, and it's 9 o'clock on Tuesday, April 26th. I'll introduce myself. I'm Nan Simonson, the author of Aging Powerfully. I'm a whole food, plant-based, and lifestyle health coach. And I work with people to prevent or treat or reverse or retreat, reverse chronic diseases. And in this practice going on for years now, I have seen so much evidence that leads me to be able to say to you with complete integrity that we are so in control of our own health, our behavior, and that's what powerfully is. This is an acronym for lifestyle behaviors that can ameliorate 80% of the chronic diseases that we see in America. I've learned that, I've worked with people, and I've got that to share. But in the meantime, today I wanted to talk about something that inspired me to give you some details without a lot of embellishment. I entitled my presentation The Marvelous Microbiome. Fun facts and more. And I'm just going to give you some details from a couple of interviews that I heard on the Food Revolution Summit. There's a summit going on right now, and I believe it ends at the end of this week. So it began probably on Sunday, so that would have been the 24th, and will end most likely next Saturday. And so what will that be, like the 30th? And it's part of a summit, a repeated summit that is done by John Robynne and his son Ocean Robynne. John Robynne wrote this book in the 70s, Diet for a New America, before anybody, and this is the 25th anniversary edition, before anybody was talking about considering what our diet was doing to us health-wise. He, as a member of the family of the Baskin and Robbins fortune, he's the son of one of the founders, believed that diet, and more importantly, a whole food plant-based diet, could save our health long term, and also our country in terms of how the diseases he saw in his own family from excess. Baskin and Robbins is what? Ice cream. They heavily ate animal proteins, animal fats, processed foods, and he came to believe that was killing Americans. And so he went against his family, wrote that book. He was not popular with them, and he has maintained that ever since. So this is a wonderful summit. And 2 days ago, I listened twice to two of the podcasts. And if you want to be part of the summit, for whatever day you join, and then those days afterwards, you can listen to any talk for a 24-hour period. So you can play it a couple of times, and there are usually 3 or 4 speakers in one day. I'll usually invest, and I did here, in the summit so that I can go back and play back the interviews. And as a health coach and as somebody who works with people, I'm now in a eating disorder recovery training apprenticeship. I'll be finished by the middle of June. That was important to me because I recovered 3.5 years ago from my own lifelong eating disorder, and I'd like to be helpful to others as well. So I'm taking that on. I want to have these kinds of details and this kind of information. So on the day that I listened to Dr. Robynne Chutkan and Dr. Bulsiewicz, both of whom are gastroenterologists, board certified and board certified in lifestyle medicine, the information was so important that I had to pass it along. And rather than my just spewing my thoughts mixed with theirs, I'm simply going to go through the notes that I took from these interviews to help you understand what we mean by the microbiome. I'll just give you a synopsis, though, of what it is. There are 37 or 38 trillion microbes in our gut being mainly the large intestine. Although those microbes, we have a microbiome on our skin, we have a microbiome in our ears, we are covered with microbes that are, in most cases, friendly bacteria, viruses, yeasts, funguses, something called archaea, which is one of the earliest of organisms on our planet, and they're still living in and on us. Those bugs outnumber our own cells, and they are primarily in the gut. They eat one thing, and that one thing is fiber. And that's one of the reasons that 3.5 years ago, I went whole food plant-based, because all of the evidence I read as I was becoming a health and lifestyle coach certified by the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, I came to understand that there was no evidence that could point to anything more than the evidence about the value of whole foods that were plant-based. Why? Because only plants have fiber. Only fiber eat the, or is, are, only fiber is eaten by the microbiome, the bugs in the microbiome, which then produce metabolites that make us healthy. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I wanted to just at least give that kind of a outline. The gut bugs weigh on an average between 3 and 5 pounds. So it's like having an organ like the spleen, like the liver, like the heart, that we've never really identified. And all of this came to light primarily through the American Gut Project, which finalized its studies in 2018 with evidence that led, for example, Dr. Bulsiewicz and Dr. Chutkan to be able to, I'll just say, focus primarily with patients on whole food plant-based eating to heal their gut. That's how prescient this information was. So let me explain how I'll say how they outlined it in their talk during this podcast with the Food Revolution Summit. First of all, Dr. Chutkan points out that a healthy gut leads to a healthy brain and thus a healthy mind due to serotonin being produced, 70% of which is produced in the gut. Part of our serotonin is produced in the brain, but 70% of it is produced in the gut if the gut is healthy. That's why, as she pointed out, an unhealthy gut has a lot to do with unhealthy thinking, depression, mental illness. A lot of that can be traced back to the wrong metabolites and the wrong microbes that end up inhabiting a gut that has dysbiosis. I'll keep going. In a 2014 study, and this is part of what inspired both Dr. Chutkan and Dr. Bulsiewicz to, without reservation, without hesitation, encourage their patients to add more plants and reduce more animal products in their diet. In this study, a group was given high animal proteins and high animal fats. They were then rested, and then the same group was given for a period of time a diet of high fiber, plant-based foods. Within 30 hours of the high fiber diet, there were significant changes in the beneficial microbia of the gut. Within 30 hours of plant-based or of animal-based, high animal fat, high animal protein, they began to see uh, detrimental bacteria like biophilia bacteria, which is bile meaning bile acids, fat-loving bacteria, um, which dropped dramatically with those that ate the plant-based diet, but rose to dangerous levels in the gut with the animal protein and the animal fat, causing things like colitis and dietary changes that increased dramatically in the presence of the animal fat and the animal protein. Um, in other words, plants were protective of the gut, animal products were detrimental to the gut. And it was a well documented study and quite important in the field. In addition, they also saw with the plant based group a increase or dramatic increase in antibacterial or antibiotic resistant bacteria, um, which are dangerous, of course, because we're finding that more and more people are not able to get help with diseases that should have been very easy, or situations that should have been very easy to be treated with antibiotics that are no longer effective because of antibiotic resistant bacteria. Well, those grew in the presence of animal products, and part of that is because 80% of the antibiotics that are produced in this country go into our animal husbandry to get those animals fat quicker and to keep them alive in overcrowded situations. The American Gut Project was a 10-year study, the largest to date on the microbiome, and it determined that it's the number and variety of plants in our diet that has the greatest determinant of health. Those that fed the microbiome the largest diversity found that it became, or that the diversity of plants and the volume of that fiber had everything to do with gut health and therefore the health of, I was going to say the organism, meaning us. Um, Regardless of dietary preferences, those who ate, and by that, what they were saying is, regardless of whether or not somebody is paleo, keto, omnivore, and preferably whole food plant based, either way, those who ate 30 or more different plants in a week had a healthier microbiome than those who ate 10 or fewer in diversity. Now, you may think 30 different plants in a week, how can anybody do that? Today at lunch, I counted what I put into my salad. Every day I have a huge salad. It begins with a combination of greens that I chop with red cabbage and carrots and radishes and jicama, and it just goes on and on. Once it's chopped, it goes into a bowl, and then I put a lot of other vegetables and legumes and grains and flavors like chopped apple and beets. I ended up with 21 plant-based items in there, including the balsamic vinegar, which is from grapes. The grapes are what they make balsamic vinegar out of. Um, it was easy enough to do. The problem is, for most Americans, the vegetables they eat tend to be potatoes from French fries, tomatoes from ketchup, and just a few little bits of things that are sitting along big chunks of meat or fish or poultry, all of which is loaded with saturated fat, all of which is loaded with antibiotics, all of which is loaded with animal proteins, all of which are inflammatory to our gut. And this was shown by the American Gut Project. One way to do this is by choosing foods of different colors. In other words, if you're looking for diversity, you can have carrots that are purple, carrots that are orange, carrots that are white, and you're going to be able to count those as three vegetables, different vegetables, because the colors have a lot to do with polyphenols, and the polyphenols all have different plant compounds that affect our microbiome differently. Another large study, mostly out of the University of Massachusetts Medical School, January 2021, of COVID patients, found that in a viral outbreak, the most predictive, even over other comorbidities, of survival and recovery is the health of the microbiome. If the microbiome is strong and diverse and has a lot of beneficial microbes, the patient has a lot better chance of survival. Another large study, your unique microbiome is a more accurate predictor of you health-wise than even your DNA. Microbiome is a compilation of everything in your environment, everything you've been in contact with, as well as everything that you eat. It even trumps those comorbidities of other types of diseases that so many people are fighting with medications and procedures like diabetes, cardiovascular disease. The healthy microbiome can help all of those things become mitigated if we've got enough and a wide variety of those microbes in our gut. And I'll tell you in just a minute why that is. Diet can affect gene expression, and even family diseases need not happen if we are in a place where our microbiome has enough diversity. The point is that we can control our own health outcome, and we can control our innate defense systems. This isn't conjecture, it's simply fact. An example is that high levels of variants of streptococcus and other organisms that are similar to streptococcus. Now they have sort of a blanket name for them, but I think most of us know what streptococcus is. It's responsible for staph infections and has been problematic for decades, and the devastation that it can create is really quite prevalent. Though not necessarily dangerous if represented in balance in the gut, if they're out of balance, the attacks can be very severe. A high fiber, non-processed food and low animal product diet can reduce the numbers dramatically of streptococcus in the microbiome, and thus leave us healthier and more resilient. The gut bacteria send signals to the immune system in a number of ways, including through what we call metabolites, and the most important of those is short-chain fatty acids. So if I were to give you a flow chart, you're eating a wide variety of foods that are as close to nature as possible, whole foods that are plant-based. The only thing that feeds the microbes in the microbiome is plants, because plants are the only thing that have fiber. No animal product, not animal fat, not any kind of meat, no animal product has fiber. Only plants have fiber, and only fiber feeds the microbiome. And the diversity of plant fibers, therefore the diversity of plants, is one of the most highly regarded ways of being able to build a microbiome. That's what was found in the American Gut Project. That has turned so many heads and make it very clear that we don't eat fiber just to move food through our system. We eat fiber, again, from plants, whole food plants, because processed foods don't work well in the microbiome. They don't identify what most of processed food is made out of, unidentifiable non-food products. And again, the gut that is fed that way is the healthiest gut that will sustain us the longest, because of the metabolites that then are produced by the bacteria once they've eaten the fiber. And the most health giving is that short chain fatty acid that goes from the top of our head, in our brain, in our cells, top of the head to the bottom of our feet, affecting us at a cellular level, affecting our endothelial cells, which then affects our arteries, in terms of heart disease, in terms of our organs like the pancreas for diabetes. Short chain fatty acids are, as I said earlier, one of the healthiest, I'll use the word metabolites on the planet. And again, they're only produced by the microbiome in the presence of food for those microbes, which is, of course, fiber. Let me make sure I've given you these, the information that I'm trying to. Why is it that so few people know this? Why is it that with all of the things we've been advised, even during COVID, you don't hear people talk about cleaning up your diet, eating more plants, eating primarily a plant-based diet? Well, the problem is that there's a lack of a willingness to address this in the public, because it has a lot to do with industry and medical complexes and their bottom line being affected by people either not needing their services or doing things simply as feeding themselves better from foods that don't have a high profit margin, like fruits, vegetables, grains and legumes, seeds and nuts, tubers like potatoes, eaten whole. And there's no lobby for these, and therefore we seldom hear about what it takes for us to get healthier, doing it in the right way, rather than the allopathic way, which is you go to your doctor, you get a pill, you get a procedure, and you're sent on your way. But none of that ever heals at the gut level the way feeding your microbiome with simple foods can do. The standard American diet, or what we call the Western diet, as eaten in America but also all over the world because we've exported it, has been shown to be predictive of bad outcomes as it relates to COVID. And again, it's because our standard American diet has precious few whole food, fiber foods in it. Most things are processed, and any identifiable fruit or vegetable has been altered to the degree that it's, again, almost unrecognizable by the microbes in our gut. In a society where people eat pretty much whatever they want and are heavily influenced by what industry puts out there, many have disrupted guts. And one of the most prevalent of those disruptions is Gerd and acid reflux. Well, the problem is that when that happens, a lot of people are prescribed proton pump inhibitors and acid blockers. The problem with those is that when acid is cut out of the stomach, we're also then opening up the playing field for pathogens that otherwise would succumb to that acid. And it's been shown that people taking proton pump inhibitors have double the risk of testing positive for COVID, because it weakens their system and it weakens their microbiome. So there's so many complexities in this loop that has to do with the simplicity of a change that can change everything in us physiologically, and that would be a change toward more whole foods that are plant-based, that are not affected by industry in any way, simply pulled out of the ground, cooked to satisfaction, and eaten, um, allowing again those bugs that we want to proliferate to do so. All right. Although I won't go into it here, Dr. Chutkan also noted that many medications, antibiotics, SSRIs, the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, NSAIDs, um, many of those affect the microbiome in a very negative way. And so again, anything that we can do that's simple, that actually feeds the microbiome, is far more beneficial than our loading up with medications because we haven't followed suit as well as we could in protecting it, and therefore being medicated in ways that make it even worse. The recommended levels of fiber in America, even though this is lower than is ideal by far, is at least 30 grams of fiber. Most Americans don't even get as much as 15 grams of whole food fiber a day. The goal would be to be at least over 45 or 50, and the healthiest people in the world with the strongest and most diverse microbiomes are up to 80 or more grams of fiber a day. In addition, an additional complication is that to people accepting the value or understanding the value of a plant-based diet is that most people don't realize where protein comes from. Animals get protein from where? From plants. And then we tend to think that animals are our only source of protein. We can cut the middleman and go to plants. All plants have protein, some more than others. Legumes and grains and seeds and nuts have the highest amount of protein. Potatoes, though, that have one of the lowest levels of protein of the plant foods, still have 10% of their calories are offered 10% in volume based on calories in protein. The World Health Organization, the Environmental Working Group, have advised that we can live very healthy lives on 5 to 7% of our diet, of our caloric intake as protein, which means even the least of the protein foods in the plant world, the potato, could keep us healthy forever. So some people don't even know where fiber comes from. Some people even believe that animal products have fiber. When people say to me, Nan, again, going on 4 years now of whole food plant-based exclusive, and they say, Nan, where do you get your protein? I'll say, there's protein in every plant food. My question to you is, where do you get your fiber? It's the fiber that's going to maintain a high level of health in your system, far more than protein. And I've seen that in my own health and that of my husband. Some people, though, have a problem with the gas and bloating that they get from high fiber foods because their body's not used to it. If your microbiome is used to processed foods, animal products, high fat products, you may not have the amount of bacteria in your system that can break down some of the more fibrous foods, but maybe a lot of other even less fibrous foods because they're just not used to it, in which case we would say go low and slow, little bits at a time, broken up by a couple of days so that you can allow the beneficial bacteria to start growing, which is what it'll do. If you cut back on the inflammatory foods, the meat proteins, meat or animal proteins, animal fats, a lot of which is saturated, and you just add more and more plant products, or just add more and more plant products and let the rest take care of itself, you're going to find that you'll have an easier time digesting. You'll start feeling better. You'll start feeling more energetic. You'll find that you recover from physical exertion far more quickly, all because of the effect and the anti-inflammatory effects of plants, not just on the microbiome, but nutritionally as well. One last thing about the COVID part of the expression of the microbiome. A healthy microbiome also is protective against long COVID. The strongest, or the stronger the microbiome, the less one will have a problem with dysbiosis, and the less that any of these new strains of COVID will become problematic. Dr. Bulsiewicz, and by the way, this is Robynne Chutkan's book. She wrote a new one called, the newest book is called The Antiviral Gut. She felt compelled to write about what the microbiome can do to have and can go forward to ameliorate the worst problems that we've seen with our viruses, the COVID, of course, in particular. This is her past book, Gut Bliss, that I found so helpful, and this was written at around the same time, maybe a little before, Dr. Bulsiewicz's book, Fiber Fuel or Gut Bliss, Fiber Fueled, both with the same conclusion from these highly educated, very successful gastroenterologists. Eat your plants, eat a variety, eat as much as you can. And then Dr. Bulsiewicz took it a little bit further. He said, stop counting fiber, count plants. Stop counting calories, count plants. Stop counting macros, count plants. This can be fun. A whole family can get into doing that. I had a good time counting what my lunch was today, over 21, and felt good about that. He reminds us that polyphenols are the antioxidant compounds that are found in plants of different colors. So the more diverse, but also the more colorful the colors of the rainbow your food is, the healthier you will be. I think I've said what I meant to say. Oh, one more thing about the gut and our brain, and this is Dr. Bulsiewicz. Our gut and our brain, our gut and our brain are so powerfully connected that it would be fair to say that the brain's best friend is the gut. Communication, most notably from short-chain fatty acids, and depression, mood disorders are connected in this way and can be lessened or reduced completely with the gut-brain axis strengthened. You can restore and protect the tight junctions that we have in the blood-brain barrier, just like you can the tight junctions in your gut, and that means the cells being tight enough that we don't have foreign proteins going through the junctions, these cellular junctions between our gut and the colon, the digestive system, and the rest of our body, as well as the brain, blood-brain barrier that protects the brain in that way. We want those tight junctions, and the short-chain fatty acids from, again, the metabolites of the digestive system help strengthen all of this and help prevent the leaky gut, as well as the protect the tight junctions in the brain. Again, diversity is the secret to a healthy gut. And finally, he describes prebiotics, probiotics and postbiotics. Prebiotics is what we eat. Probiotics is what happens when the plants are fed to the microbes. And then postbiotics are the things that are produced from those microbes, like short chain fatty acids that affect our bodies so positively. Everything is hand in glove here. Everything has to do with our decisions to look at what our choices are, to look at the possibility and understand why those choices can change everything about your future health-wise. And if it takes little steps, take little steps. If you can do it in bigger steps, decide a day, a week. It's going to be all plant-based foods, no animal products, then 2 days, then 3 days, then 4 days. My husband and I pretty well just jumped into it. We had some bad health markers. I knew that a plant-based diet was the way to go. And we decided one day, and it took 3 months, and everything that had anything to do with animals was completely out of the house, and that's been going on now, as I said, 3.5 years. Okay, I hope this was helpful. I hope I didn't just go on and on. And if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear from you. And okay, that's it. I'm going to go to bed now. Consider reading Aging Powerfully. It's an interesting read, an interesting story. And the first third of it is memoir, because I went through some real challenging times with my own, I'll call it food fears and eating disorder. And I do credit a whole food plant-based diet with the health, the emotional stability, the wellness, and the energy that I feel now at 71. I've never felt better. Have a great, I was going to say day because I'm going to. Have a great night because I'm going to. Bye-bye.